I know that we've heard a lot of bad news today, and I'm afraid I have more bad news about Somalia. But before I do that, I'd just like to share something positive, something that's not reported in the media. But I was speaking to a reporter today from Mogadishu, and I was, I guess, surprised, but I found out that apparently there is at least one institution in Somalia that has endured the civil war and the conflict, and that is apparently functioning, and that's the Somali Olympic Association. I found out that in Mogadishu, when bullets are not flying, the residents are actually flocking to basketball and football tournaments in the neighborhoods. And this has become the most popular form of entertainment as people deal with the Civil War. And this is something, unfortunately, that's not reported in the media. And from speaking to many Somali reporters, their editors with the big news agencies seem to be more interested about the killing, the misery, the refugees. But I just want to point out that there are stories, good stories happening in Somalia, people enduring during the conflict. With that said, unfortunately, I have to revert to more bad news. Somalia is, of course, one of the most dangerous nations for journalists. When we talk about Somalia, as far as we're concerned, safety is the #1 issue. All parties to the conflict have waged a war on the Somali independent media, which has essentially been caught in the crossfire. And this is a struggle to control the message of the conflict. Like Falastin was saying earlier, when reporters report abuses or security operations by the transitional government or abuses committed by the Al-Shabaab, they become immediately targeted. This has been happening consistently, and we know that since 2007, 11 Somali journalists were deliberately murdered in direct relation to their work. This is not by crossfire, this is deliberate murders. Some of the country's best reporters have been killed, and the losses are personal to us at CPJ, because these are people that we work with, interact with. These are journalists that really take enormous risks to carry out their duties, and they're essentially being targeted for doing their job. We know that many other journalists are being continually injured in the line of duty just about every day. And the impunity for these crimes, of course, creates a climate of fear for the media. And it has forced dozens of journalists to leave their countries, often leaving their families behind. And this is always a very difficult decision, because obviously the life of a refugee is a harsh life. Restarting your life in a new country is never easy. In addition to local journalists, 5 foreign journalists have been kidnapped and held for ransom since 2007. And these are journalists mostly that were investigating the smuggling from Puntland to Yemen. We have spoken out against these abuses, but the challenges are daunting, especially when you're dealing with a failed state and you're dealing with non-state actors. How do you hold the Al-Shabaab accountable? How do you hold transitional government accountable when the government controls, the radius of control is maybe a mile in Mogadishu? Now, worse than that, we have been confronted with the impact of the humanitarian crisis, often beyond our institutional capacity. We have been overwhelmed with distressed phone calls and emails from traumatized and battered Somali reporters in hiding or fleeing for their lives due to threats. In many ways, reporters are seen as spies, especially by the Al-Shabaab. Just showing a camera or a recorder can lead you to be killed, because essentially the reporters or the journalists have been associated with foreign interests, and they're being intimidated on a day-to-day basis. Nevertheless, though, since late 2007, we have provided assistance to nearly 30 Somali journalists, assistance in the form of grants, asylum letters, and even emergency evacuations for journalists that are literally trapped in their newsroom, afraid to go outside because they keep receiving anonymous phone calls or text messages telling them to stop what they're doing, to stop talking on the radio. And you can imagine the terror. As a journalist, of course, you're exposed by the nature of your job, and not to know who's calling you, not to know who's threatening you is extremely unsettling. In 2008, in partnership with local organizations, we helped 20 Somali journalists relocate to neighboring countries or in the region. This year alone, we have reviewed and vetted at least 9 assistance requests from journalists injured, exiled, or wishing to relocate in a third country. And unfortunately, we can only help 5 or 6 of these. So you can imagine how hard it is to say no, but it's just to give you an idea that we are overwhelmed, and we feel the impact of this humanitarian crisis firsthand. We're not detached from the situation. It's a very real situation that all of us feel on a day-to-day basis. I will say that it's not all misery and despair. Of course, there are parts of Somalia where there's relative peace. And I will say a word about an empowering story, for instance, that is probably not very well known, but it's just an example of how the Somali diaspora is getting involved. There is the story of Abdi Wali Sheikh Ahmed, a U.S. citizen born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland. Abdi Wali returned to Somalia, particularly Puntland, and invested, through the help of friends, invested in a television station in Bosaso. He built a studio, trained staff, provided jobs for the local community. The station is now on satellite, and his goal is to bring news from Somalia to the diaspora around the world. Now, this is an empowering story of somebody trying to take advantage of the opportunities available in Somalia, because there are opportunities. And the question is always asked what people can do. And I think there is a big role for the Somali diaspora to play in essentially rebuilding their country. Individuals taking actions often precede government actions. I think probably many Somalis are probably frustrated about this political process and just turned off by all these years. And some of them are taking action, and it should be an example that needs to be supported and that needs to be followed. Thank you.
Thank you so much to all of our panelists. At this time, since we are running out of time, I will go ahead and open up questions to the audience. There is a microphone in the center.